When in conversations with people who have seen B. James Bond films starring Sean Connery and Roger Moore, a lot of people I've met say they have very fond memories watching them when they're younger. In fact, some of them say they still love those movies. But even back when those movies were first released, and still today, some critics and some so-called Bond fans online, they say they hate the movies such as The Man with the Golden Gun, Moonraker, Octopussy, and A View to a Kill, calling them unrealistic, implausible, silly, goofy, stupid, and they have been comparing them with what they think are the best Bond films such as Goldfinger, The Spy Who Loved Me, GoldenEye, Casino Royale, and Skyfall. However, there are some people online who may not rate Moonraker and Octopussy highly as Bond films, but still describe them as being very entertaining movies if you just go with their silliness. Actually, when I was researching for this review, I was pretty surprised to learn that Octopussy tends to be more favoured than Moonraker and View to a Kill by online reviewers, if only because of the action and comedy entertainment value. But still today, a number of sensitive people object to the outlandish premise and execution of Octopussy, of which its circus plot point inherently brings about very funny moments which some people think as too embarrassing for the James Bond character, or their viewing experience. I was rewatching Octopussy, and even as a standalone action movie, it is still great fun to watch with some great moments to offer. But while I was watching this movie, I started realising that the circus plot point of the film is actually a recurring feature across the Bond films, as some of them are blatant. Going chronologically, starting from Goldfinger back in 1964, the Bond villain hires Pussy Galore, who has her own flying circus. Note the girls' uniforms and the majestic lettering fonts of their logos, are similar to Monty Python's Flying Circus actually. They do not have clowns, but in the original novel by Ian Fleming, Pussy Galore's gang were instead skilled burglars who came from a background of trapeze artistry, which itself can be found in circus performances and street performances. A very blatant example is found in Diamonds Are Forever in 1971, filmed at a real location in Las Vegas called Circus Circus. A stuffed toy prize filled with diamonds is used as a plot point, as well as a conveniently placed red balloon on the oil rig which Bond uses to signal his allies to invade and blow the place up in spectacular fashion, as the movie trailer promised. There is also a scene where Sean Connery's Bond encounters two women who turn out to be athletic and quite tough, and they may as well come from the same circus seen earlier in the movie. Weirdly, they are called Bambi and Thumper, straight out of a Disney film. Why the filmmakers chose their names, they did not say. I can only guess that their names are like stage names used by circus characters. Bongo, Dumbo and so on.
Walt Disney! Mark.
And the names Bambi and Thumper being taken from fictional animal characters as to be animalistic sides to them. Especially Thumper, who initially poses on a rock like she's a feline predator in waiting. In a bizarre scene earlier in the same movie, a black woman, the same ethnicity as Thumper, is depicted as turning into a gorilla in a Kitty Horror stage show, presumably aided by visual trickery.
Take my beauty wig.
Live and Let Die has its own variation of a circus, which are stage shows of a Bond henchman Baron Samedi, dubbed as a man who cannot die and who dresses in his Halloween makeup and gear, both in the film's public stage show and a private sacrificial ritual. The guy has an animatronic puppet as a little stand-in too. The villain of A Man with a Golden Gun, Francisco Scaramanga, was described of being born and raised in a circus, which included performing trick shots in circus performances as a kid, That's in both the movie and the original novel by Ian Fleming. In Moonmaker, circus references are made in two scenes where we least expect them. Here, and on the night of the Rio Carnival, with carnival costumes, Jaws is disguised as a clown with a grisly mask, designed quite similarly to Heath Ledger's Joker. Jaws is literally a sideshow freak. How can the filmmakers make that point more clear? Jaws has its own distinguished visual appearance of being tall and having metal teeth, and its biting ability makes him like a circus animal. As with Baron Sammartino's reputation, Jaws unrealistically survive in situations where real people can actually die in. In fact, he outlives some of the other henchmen who died in similar ways, surviving without any bruises or clothing that is burnt or torn. Apparently, even his clothes are invincible. We've then got Octopussy, the circus element being there on all kinds of levels.
Sit.
Circuses are hardly referenced or used again in the franchise, but there are close comparisons which mainly manifest in scenes set in the family event context, and having the similar kind of music to what circuses use. The Living Daylights, which toned down a lot of the humorous presentation of the previous Bond movies, but still has warmth and humour on display for a good balance, this movie has a funfair scene, complete with funfair rides, cartoonish ghosts, and circus-like music. Actually, the term a roller coaster ride does get used by critics to describe frenetic action movies generally. And going back in time to 1969, On Her Majesty's Secret Service has scenes that takes place in the Ice Carnival on Christmas holiday. A henchman's prolonged death scene is strangely accompanied by the festive music. Only seconds later, another action moment kicks in, but with the action music instead. The festival music carries on as Bond makes his way through the Ice Carnival. Bond tries to escape his captors, and he nearly has a heart attack by something very unexpected. There are close comparisons such as the opening Mexican Carnival Inspector, complete with fancy dresses and makeup, but that's as far as the latest Bond films get from what I remember. Okay, you would have noticed those examples yourselves, even on your first viewings of the movies, and would have made the connection yourselves with the main examples before you are watching this video, but I cannot recall anyone having written or published articles or videos online making a thematic correlation between these movies. And I have read and watched a number of movie reviews of the Bond films before I finalised my rough text of this study. And even then, that is just the tip of the iceberg. The Circus Paradigm in the Bond films is actually evident in more subtle ways which you might have missed, or maybe you have noticed some of them yourself but never given them a second thought or realised the correlating patterns. As I rewatched the movies and researched some of the production histories for this study, I kept writing down notes and realised there are plenty of interlocking details and concepts, which I think collectively has ensured a strong audience following to this day. Even though audiences think of the Bond films as simple movies for escapism, they still have the great charm of their own that makes audiences still coming back to these movies, some of them from time to time. And by the way, I'm basing this study on almost all of the Bond films from Dr. No up to The Living Daylights, because I think there's an overall artistic and aesthetic consistency between these movies. And bear in mind that some of the details that I'm presenting in this video do overlap with other contexts such as funfair rides and stunt shows, but given the examples that we've been going through so far, it's almost like there is some sort of a sort of thematic and conceptual overlaps between these different contexts anyway. I'll start with a crucial production background which strongly supports this circus theme being present since the James Bond series began. One of the main producers for all of the early Bond films up to The Man with the Golden Gun was Harry Saltzman, who came from a background of showmanship. He apparently worked for a travelling circus for years as a youngster. He worked in affordable houses and he managed an attraction show called the Gilbert Brothers' Combined Circus. Given this background, it's plausible that Saltzman deliberately helped structure the James Bond concepts and tropes in a similar way to extravagant attraction shows with circus elements. Saltzman would have known what kinds of elements in attraction shows worked or not based upon many years of practice with audiences. And I think he inspires how filmmakers like co-producer Albert Broccoli continue to infuse the circus paradigm in some of the other Bond films Saltzman didn't work with. Alright, let us explore the character dynamics in these movies in relation to circus themes. The circus paradigm clearly explains why we have henchmen such as Jaws, Knick-Knack, Oddjob, Mayday and so on. These characters have physical characteristics that are not ordinarily displayed by average people. There are other villains and henchmen who stand out visually on account of certain visual appearances. This guy in For Your Eyes Only wears an unusual hexagon-shaped sunglasses in every scene he is in. Some of them have names which sound so unusual and catchy they may as well be stage names, most especially Dr. No. And Scaramanga has his stage names of sorts in the film's title.
Scaramanga? Oh yes, the man with the golden gun.
In fact, the Bond villains, Dr. No, Blofeld, Drax and Kamal Khan wear a similar sort of beige jacket with neck collars and similar clothing, so it may as well be an all-rounder kind of villain costume. We have henchmen who are dressed in colourful uniforms. I say this here because Octopussy has her own henchwomen dressed in bright coloured red uniforms. When it comes to Bongos, while they do change clothes from scene to scene, some of them have their own distinct costumes of sorts, with some of them being revealing. Well, a lot of them are primarily there for sex appeal. Like with some of the villains, a handful of the girls have stage names of their own characters.
My name is Pussy Galore.
Hi, I'm Plenty.
But of course you are.
Plenty O'Toole.
Named after your father, perhaps?
Black Queen on the Red King, Miss...
Solitaire.
Sounds very tempting, Miss,
Sure me.
Really?
And they tend to wear makeup too. Some of them go over the top. This is most especially presented in A View to a Kill. The title sequence emphasizes the makeup which glows in the dark, and two of the Bongos themselves have pretty heavy makeup. But makeup doesn't spoil their looks. I mean, there are women and drag queens out there who took the heavy makeup to an extreme, sometimes deliberately for comedy effect, making them look like sort of like clowns. Speaking of clowns, the redneck Sheriff J.W. Pepper in Live and Let Die and The Man with a Golden Gun, he is widely hated by Bond fans for being a stupid character unnecessary to a plot. And in Live and Let Die, I do think he could have done with some better dialogue and one-liners, considering his prolonged screen time. But his presence in those movies makes sense if we think of him as actually a clown of sorts. His appearance and personality are so stereotypical, he would still likely have comedic purpose in modern American entertainment as a slowing racist cop. It is very obvious he's played for exaggerated comedy effect. Compare the guy with his fellow cops who look and sound more natural by comparison.
JW, let me have a word with you. JW, now this fella's from London, England. He's an Englishman working in cooperation with our boys, a sort of secret agent.
Secret agent? On whose side?
That looked like a boat. Stuck in the sheriff's car there, Eddie? Boy, where you been all your life? That there's one of them new car boats.
By the powers invested in me by this parish.
He is subject to a lot of ridicule, with his cast being smashed, and he has his moments with an elephant in The Man with a Golden Gun. Like a clown having his performance with an elephant.
Boy, you is ugly.
Another sort of clown is the Soviet General Orlov, played hilariously by Steven Berkoff. While his comrades are presented as relatively casual with their Russian accents, speaking an English language by the way, and their Lenin album poster in the background, this character is played quite over the top. He's pretty much like a caricature or something like that, you know. He acts very much like Hitler.
We have played out a variety of attack strategies on the new Kutsov computer and find that a lightning thrust by 10 armored divisions from the north and by 5 more through Czechoslovakia lead to total victory in 5 days against any possible defense scenario.
This was standard of a kind of movie depictions of Soviet military villains at the time. In fact, Steven Berkoff played pretty much the same kind of character later in Rambo 2. There are a couple of more of noteworthy caricatures of interest present in the Bond films. In the DVD commentary for Moonraker, the filmmakers joked about the Soviet General Gogol having very red pajamas. They joked about him looking like Santa Claus, because it's snowing outside, and they joked about the pajamas being as red as a communist flag. At the ending of For Your Eyes Only, we are shown Margaret Thatcher, who, on the surface, does not appear to be a caricature. She is depicted here as a humble, hard-working housewife, doing the dishes. This is how Margaret Thatcher depicted herself in real life. Of course, here she is played by a different actress. But her husband, Dennis, is shown being aloof. And the notion of Margaret Thatcher talking to a parrot at the other side of the line, that's almost like a statement in itself. Like the people who converse with Margaret Thatcher and maybe compliment her are effectively parrots. This is interesting. It's like one of those journalistic pieces that tries to portray both sides of a party, you know, offering us both the perceptions from both sides. But there is an underhanded preference being pushed forward, which here is the mockery element. Relevant to political caricatures, in The Living Daylights we have Brad Whitaker's collection of mannequins portraying infamous dictators across history, with himself standing erect, the next potential dictator in waiting. When it comes to Bond himself, he is typically presented in his tuxedo, which has become synonymous with the character, even though tuxedos have been worn by most people on the planet throughout modern history. I argue to be his own equivalent of a stuntman's costume, or maybe a superhero costume. There's a number of evidence that support this kind of argument. In pretty much every main poster for a Bond film up to The Living Daylights, Bond is seen wearing a black tuxedo somewhere when he sometimes doesn't in the actual movie scenes some posters would depict. Even in posters for Moonraker, he is shown wearing a tuxedo underneath his spacesuit, and here he is shown flying above the Earth like Superman, without a space helmet. That's beyond realism fantasy right there. In Moonraker, everyone dresses up for the carnival. Bond here wears not his Clint Eastwood costume he would wear later, but in his standard tuxedo, standing him out visually. The Clint Eastwood costume is also one of the many nudges of Bond basically being a fantasy character, as the Man with No Name is a fictional tough guy of action movies, and that's what Bond is, except he has a name. In The Man with a Golden Gun, Scaramanga has a life-size action figure of James Bond, which is what Bond becomes at the end. In Octopussy, I know many people hate the idea of Bond dressing up as a clown as it doesn't look cool to them, But for me, this is the greatest revelation of Bond being a fantasy character. And Octopussy is revealing on multiple levels. Earlier in the movie, there's a visual composition that frames Bond as spreading his arms over this poster of Octopussy Circus, in a way that very interestingly mirrors the flying human cannonball character, who is also shown spreading his wings in similar directions to Bond's arms. So it is very appropriate that when Bond enters the circus, the announcer tries to announce the human cannonball stuntman, only for Bond the Clown to appear, like he's the actual guy the announcer was referring to.
I have the pleasure in presenting to you Francisco de Fairley.
Of course, we should not forget that Bond has his own fanfare.
It's a charming tune.
And there are 007 references used in 2 Bond films from what I saw, with Live and Let Die's modified tarot cards having a sneaky inclusion. Solitaire indeed foretold Bond's future of being a clown.
You have found yourself.
But that's not just an Easter egg. If you actually look at the original tarot card designs by Fergus Hall, a lot of the cards visually overlap strongly with the characters and events of the story. But getting back on topic, there is more than just filling roles for character actors. A lot of the characters have been compared to animals or infused with animal-like behaviour.
Talking about lines, which one did you use on this case?
Miss Case has taken a terribly reasonable attitude about all this. Like any sensible animal, she's only threatening when she's threatened.
Perhaps we should add this butterfly to our collection? No?
In one top-to example, Blofeld may be a human being, but the camera angles emphasises his cat, who look at specific directions, as if Blofeld is a cat.
T-minus 7 minutes, and counting.
You made a mistake, my friend. No astronaut would enter the capsule carrying his air conditioner. Remove his helmet.
The actor playing Scaramanga, Christopher Lee, has a predatory look about his facial complexions. Here he is sleeping like a wolf, or a vampire, depending on your point of view. In For Your Eyes Only, although the guy wearing the bulky diving suit appears to be a normal guy, the dark lighting and the pinters may as well cast him as a horror show monster. And here's a strange but specific example in Octopussy. The funny stuffed sheep's head meal is intercut with a sudden zoom shot to the henchman Gobinder, who is staring at Bond.
It's odd. But when I'm stared at, I seem to lose my appetite.
There is some sort of statement being made here, like a sort of comparison between Gobinder and this goat. As we're part of the animal kingdom, these kinds of behaviours and descriptions are part of the human psyche anyway, but given that the filmmakers intended the likes of Jaws and Bambi and Thumper to be like human personifications of animals, there is definitely something going on that goes beyond our everyday ordinary use of people referring to each other as animals. And now here's an interesting aspect of how the characters are written. A number of adult characters themselves have childlike qualities to them, which helps make the Bond franchise appeal to both kids and adults to be family movies. Think of Judy Garland in The Wizard of Oz or Luke Skywalker as classic examples of such. With the villains, Jaws connected well with kids partially on account of his kitty-like mannerisms, and Knick-Knacker's child height with a quite high-pitched voice. Here in The Living Daylights, the villain Brad Whitaker plays with his models reenacting military battles, like kids with Warhammer. This is definitely true with the Bond girls as well, not Bond women. A very obvious example is the character Bibi in For Your Eyes Only, who was played by Lynn Holly Johnson at age 22, but the acting and scripting of the character may as well depict Bibi as much younger, like 16 or 18 years old, and Bond treats her as such.
Why, I think you're wonderful, Bibi, but I don't think your Uncle Harry would approve.
Him? He thinks I'm still a virgin.
Yes, well, you get your clothes on. I'll buy you an ice cream.
A speculative side note here. Was the name Bibby intentionally written to sound like the word baby? On Her Majesty's Secret Service, George Lazenby's Bond infiltrates Blovelt's hideout, where Blovelt is treating and brainwashing women from all over the world. The women behave very much like schoolgirls or college girls on an educational trip.
Yes, but what's a genealogist? What is that?
Army word for an old people's doctor.
Ah, so he's here to cure Fräulein Bund. Watch yourself, she's got ears like an elephant. Yes, but what is a genealogist? Will nobody tell me?
It would give me great pleasure to tell you. Genealogy is all about ancestors and families. I mean, it could easily be that any one of you here is related to a royal house. If only we could go back far enough to find out.
Going away presents from the Count himself in appreciation.
Why won't you open mine now?
Oh, no. It is more fun to open them all together, yes. Please sit down. We will wait for the others. Goodbye, girls. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Fröhliche Weihnachten.
Frohe Weihnachten.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Bye.
Going to A View to a Kill, the main Bond girl, Stacy, she lives alone in a big house with some of the rooms being very empty, and she has a bedroom adorned with props and decoration like an old-fashioned kid's bedroom. It feels like a big dollhouse to me. Home alone, she mistakes Bond for a wet bandit, but they get along with each other, with Bond making her dinner and tucking her in bed like a daddy saying goodnight. No wonder people complained of Roger Moore being too old to be shown to Juicy McGill. They try to offset the childish aspects of Stacy by having her come out of an elevator with a shorter woman to remind us that Stacy is played by an adult, but people still complained of the couple being too far apart in age. And the Bond girl of A Living Daylights, Kara, she has a very young looking face with some shots of her wide eyes and short hair. She could easily pass as much younger than the actress actually was. And we look here in this opera scene. When the opera ends, Kara very enthusiastically jumps in applause before everyone else. She enjoyed the show like a kid at a pantomime. Now if you think I'm over-analysing here, I invite you to go check out the actress Maran Diablo in the low-budget sci-fi horror film Extra, which came out in 1982, 5 years before Living Daylights, and yet the actress did not have the childish mannerisms or looks at all. With her deeper voice, longer hairdo, and tired-looking eyes, she looked and sounded like a normal adult despite being younger at that point in her career. And her mouth in Extra tends to be closed, compared to her performance in The Living Daylights, where her mouth tends to be slightly gaping, exposing her teeth. So the childish mannerisms and looks in her performance in Living Daylights are clearly either intended by the actress or as directed by the director. Lastly, going back to JW, he has a baby face of his own with his licking movements. Again, that sort of goes back to animal metaphors. He's like an excited dog, and of course, criminals refer to cops as pigs.
Thanks for dropping in, baby. Yeah, you one tough pig to nail down.
Okay, I will now start transitioning this topic from characters to environments. Circuses in real life ported over animals and people from exotic countries, which Westerners tend not to see, at least back in the 20th century, and laws have clamped down on animals being used in circuses, which is understandable. The Bond films capitalized on the exotic characters and creatures, on top of exotic locations being advertised to us for our consideration of going to these places ourselves for holidays, with the musical scores of the movies incorporating rhythms and instruments typically used by different cultures.
Rosie!
Even outer space has its audiences, despite us knowing it to be a very dangerous realm with no atmosphere, and thus we're hesitant to the idea of doing space travels, of which we compensate by watching science fiction movies and video games. But sometimes real life mismatches the beauty of the sceneries.
Let's up with that. Now close over these foot. It's wonderful. It's part of making a picture like this. Rich, nature. I wouldn't keep going if I were you.
Similarly, exotic-looking characters with their lavish clothing are contrasted by the many scenes where people of the streets have normal clothing. Groups of characters and extras across the different movies are dressed according to their unique environments around the world. And that's true of other movies too. At least that was how the cultures were like back when the movies were made. These days, these people in Live and Let Die would not go around with colourful costumes and fluffy umbrellas. They'd be dressing like punks and sing rap music from Gravediggers or NWA. Some of the black characters have quite stereotypical accents and lingo.
Keep your hands up, honky. What do you think this is? Blow his friggin' head off, man.
With the felon Kananga disguising himself as Mr. Big, wearing blazing outfits, a fake rig, and a gruff voice that makes him look and sound like a stereotypical pimp. That's Kananga's public performance.
You damn lucky you got an air left to hear the question with. Which is, did you mess with that? You ain't gonna see the sunlight unless you answer me.
I had no idea you were so frightened of him.
Did you touch her?
And yet, when his real identity is exposed, he looks and sounds a lot more natural, and dresses less lavishly.
Somehow I never thought of you as a poor loser. I was hoping you would join me to a drink to the future. Oh, Miss Solitaire used to know all about the future. She was especially good in predicting death.
Mr. Barnesworth, my dear, I gave you every break possible. You had a 50-50 chance. You weren't even close.
The late actor playing him, by the way, Yaphet Kotto, he was excellent as the villain. He is actually one of my favourite black actors of all time. He should have been a bigger star. Another dynamic is that the different characters and extras with different ethnicities and cultures are mixed together. This especially comes to the forefront in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Moonraker, and A View to a Kill. And in Moonraker, the henchman Chang wears the same Chinese uniform in most of his scenes set in Europe, and he has his own kind of Chinese duel with Bond in Venice. Getting more specific to locations, we have multiple instances of the films incorporating theatrical and extravagant shows. Musical performances, racing circuits, fun houses, dancing performances, and so on.
Play it again, Sam.
With some elements being ported over to other sets which, on the surface, are completely separate. Most interesting is the theatrical use of lighting. Some scenes start with Bond being in the dark before the scene is completely lit to reveal the villains we're watching from the dark. We have some basic bold colours like red and green lighting. This seems to be common across the series. And we have candles being used in shots where they are not really necessary to be present apart from theatrical aesthetics. Basically being like the candles in the opera scenes of The Living Daylights. I think they are electric candles if I'm not mistaken. Sparkling lighting is present in some of the Bond scenes and title sequences to convey the sparkles of romance. And I noticed in the theatrical context, the sparkling dresses of the Chinese dancers is gorgeously used in these shots in The Man with the Golden Gun to also convey romance, the background being out of focus to accentuate the sparkles. And John Barry's soundtrack for the scene includes delicate piano notes for an equal twinkling effect.
There's really nothing very much for us to do tonight. Or is there?
This is deliberate arrangement because the character Goodnight says goodnight to Bond and walks off just as the dancers went off stage too. As a side note regarding the theatrical use of lighting, I think there is a missed opportunity by the filmmakers to make the lighting effects more creative in the final duel between Bond and Scaramanga. Earlier in the movie, we are shown lighting effects which flicker on and off as Scaramanga kills his target, with a light literally flashing before this guy's eyes. The final duel between Bond and Scaramanga is comparatively well lit, so I think it would have been better if the scene has the same kind of flashing lights to the one seen earlier in the movie. Probably the most overt incorporation of theatrical shows apart from the Circus in Octopussy is the Pyramid's light show in The Spy Who Loved Me. The visual compositions and narration interestingly mirrors the James Bond storyline in places.
With each new dawn, I see the sun god rise on the far bank of the Nile. I am the faithful warden at the foot of his law. So faithful, so vigilant, so near him that he gave me his faith for my own. This is the tomb of Cheops. Here is the great pyramid which he built to defend himself against death. Here in the depths of his tomb, a servant of the king awaits the call to set out upon his journey into eternity.
Where is Fekish?
With the pharaohs.
Here's a weird scene from Diamonds Are Forever. When Bond infiltrates a secure compound belonging to Blofeld, he stumbles across a stage set depicting astronauts walking on the moon. When Bond is exposed, he escapes on the moon buggy, with the astronaut extras still being in character, with them moving in slow motion as if they are on the moon. Is this a parody of the fake moon landing theories? What were the actual intentions of this set from the character's point of view? Where are the cameras, unless we're looking through one with this angle? Was Blofeld planning to fuel the fake moon landing rumours further? What does he have to gain from this? I really don't know, but it is a stage set with comedy elements, which ties in with his study, and the Bond films do use political and technological issues of the day as part of their stories. And now we come to Ken Adams's excellent set designs for these movies. Adam has a unique visual style which was largely influenced by the kinds of depicted in movies such as The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. You can see the inspiration in Ken Adams's sketches where he used sharp and unpolished shapes and textures. Ken Adam once said he'd tend to design sketches by drawing random initial shapes before he refined the set designs with more details as his designs started to take shape. That's a good method for any artist struggling with creative blocks. So I was not entirely sure myself of whether Ken Adam infused circus and theatrical aspects in his designs, or if those aspects were incidental. But there are interesting details which do lean towards that theme. In an interview regarding his War Room set design for Stanley Kubrick's movie Dr. Strangelove, he said, quote, "I wanted a shiny black floor, like I've seen in the Fred Astaire musicals," end quote. Shiny black floors do make their way into some of the set designs in the Bond films, such as his depiction of Fort Knox in Goldfinger. In the same movie, one of the mafia gangsters said this. This set in Goldfinger is very theatrical and must have costed hundreds for the villain, and yet Goldfinger executed every gangster who was the audience to the show. He really likes to impress people before killing them. In some of his sets and sketches, he structured the set with circular appearances, sometimes with a map or globe of planet Earth in the centre. And sometimes he places seating areas around the centre, or below the stage. His sets for You Only Live Twice and The Spy Who Loved Me strongly parallel each other in some ways, both of them having monorail tracks which reminds me of roller coasters, with the one in The Spy Who Loved Me being literally turned into a water ride. And both of them having security window shutters for the control rooms. And both turn into war zones. Moonraker's space station design is very interesting. It's circular, it's got ladders to climb up and down for added physicality, and its ceilings have structural lines which are reminiscent of the circus designs seen in Moonraker and Octopussy. Looking too much into it? Maybe. But go check out this sketch and this photo of a deleted segment of Moonraker. In this spiderweb looking set, Ken Adams' sketch depicts people floating and flying around in zero gravity like they are doing gymnastics. As you see, it was done on the set, but for some reason it was cut from a final movie. A bit of a shame. I think the scene should have been kept in some way if it was completed as planned. The gymnastic point now leads me to the physicality of the action scenes. In the title sequence for The Spy Who Loved Me and Moonraker, we get to see men and women leaping about the place and swinging around gun barrels. And the dancing stage shot in Diamonds Are Forever strongly parallels with the typical visual aesthetics of the movie's title sequences. Many of the stunts and spectacular visuals presented in Bond films also can be seen in action movies generally, and can be seen in comparative sports and stunt shows that have similar purposes to circuses, but typically are presented very differently. There are noteworthy actors and actresses who athletically were trained in the fields to become their own stunt people, like the actor playing Oddjob, Harold Sokaka, a Korean who had a career in boxing before appearing in Goldfinger. Action scenes generally exaggerate physicality for dramatic and comedy effect. People leaping around, big objects crushing bad guys, big explosions, cars sent flying and crashing, some of them being at least affordable, objects being bashed over. Compare this shot in Moonraker of a henchman naturally jumping off an exploding boat with an earlier shot of a henchman sent flying by the same kind of explosive device. And in Octopussy, according to a DVD commentary, the henchman Goldbinder's sword is powered with an electric battery attached to it so that they can get the sparkles whenever Goldbinder slashes up a train. However, there are telling signs that make some of the stunts in the Bond films lean towards the spectacular show subtext. On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Bond's escape by skiing is accompanied by a henchman putting a spotlight on his escapades. A spotlight is later used for an incidental ice rink show. In Live and Let Die, Bond makes his escape from an alligator lake by running on alligators. That's something out of a Crash Bandicoot game. In the same movie, Kananga has the most bizarre and hilarious death of any villain. I don't know if it's possible for a man to die this way as an exploding balloon, which happens to be hollow and bloodless on the inside. In The Man with a Golden Gun, there is a comical whistle sound effect for the corkscrew scene, which some people don't like. John Barry added it, you can hear it on the soundtrack.
Never heard of Evel Knievel?
The sumo wrestling statues in Haivatz's garden come to life. with Knick-Knack disguising himself as a statue, and attempted to reenact one of the historical atrocities depicted in the scene recreation. After Bond escapes with a karate class having their asses kicked, Scaramanga remarks,
"What do they teach in that school? Ballet dancing?"
Actually, speaking from personal experience, a teacher of a taekwondo club I used to go to once described to me about the physical movements patterns of a Tekken set as being akin to ballet. In The Spy Who Loved Me, Bond mocks the motorcycle assassin's death.
All those feathers and he still can't fly.
There is also this tramp on a trampoline. In Moonraker, there is a boat chase scene taking place in Vienna. In a theatrical fashion, an assassin appropriately poses as a dead guy in a coffin so he can try to kill Bond. And he lives up to his reputation. Bond performs his own kind of publicity stunt with his hovercraft, adults being baffled with kids chasing after it. And I'll interject here that I suspect this scene with a blinking pigeon is there to troll the disbelieving critics, and there are still a number of Bond fans who express annoyance at these kinds of moments instead of just going along with the ride. Most of the things shown on screen uses real objects in real locations to create convincing illusions, and yet the snobbish critics and viewers still reject them. We have a magic roundabout, and there's another water ride slide, this time with Jaws. For Your Eyes Only, Bond makes his escape using an umbrella to float down, and an umbrella is later seen as a lethal gadget.
Stinging in the rain?
That's not funny, 007.
Remember, umbrellas are used in the opening scenes of Moonraker in the circus context. Later, in For Your Eyes Only, he rides down a bobsled slide like it's a roller coaster. You know, it has that sort of linear pathway, but you also go underneath arches at high speeds. And this is present in some of the other Bond films. While we are on this particular scene, I must emphasise that there are also moments in the Bond films where it shows different kinds of sports being mixed together. Here, in For Your Eyes Only, we got ice skating mixed with a bobsled and a motorbike in a same course. We have ice skating that mixes with surfing in View to a Kill. You got a boat chase that ends in paragliding. And here in Moonraker, Chang's slapstick duel with Bond turns into a fencing match. Of course, there's Octopussy. In fact, the guy playing Ager was an actual tennis player himself. The tennis sport context is jokingly used in a car chase scene. In The Living Daylights, this moment harbours back to Scaramanga's Bondhouse playground. Something else interesting is that there are circus and festive costumes which feature dices on the designs. Is this relevant to James Bond being super talented in gambling games? Almost like a magician? I mean, he did his appearing and disappearing tricks twice in these movies. The parallels of supernatural guidance and card games is briefly emphasised in Live and Let Die, a film featuring tarot cards, At the end of the movie, we're left to assume that Solitaire, with her intuition, will become a great card player. Imagine her doing card tricks in a magic show. Then we got the great gadgets and inventive weapons the heroes and villains use, which, combined with real dangerous stunts shown on cameras, go a long way to make many action scenes semi-believable for first-time viewers. Director John Glenn says in a DVD commentary of Octopussy that the cool yo-yo saw was designed because it's based on yo-yos which kids use and relate to. In fact, some of the gadgets and makeup used actually parallel a lot with what the real espionage agents used during the Cold War. And there are some funny real cases of espionage that were even more silly than anything seen in the Bond films. That's an interesting irony regarding the critical responses to the Roger Moore Bond films, but I'll go through that in more detail in another video I'm planning. Anyway, back to Bond. Some of the gadgets are made equivalent to children's toys, with Bond basically being like a boy wanting to play with them.
A toy helicopter?
No, it's certainly not a toy.
This can only be for children. Don't use it, Bonsan.
Very novel, Kira. We must get them in the stores for Christmas.
You know, he kills little girls like you.
Little boys, too.
And now for my final topic relating to the study, the audience dynamics. Going back to the character of J.W. Pepper in The Man with the Golden Gun, his role has evolved to be more than just a clown. Here, he gets splashed by the main attraction of the show like an audience member of a circus, seated right next to the action in his tourist clothes, and later he becomes a participant in the action. And we could say this scene is as much Bond having to contend with an annoying character as much as having to deal with one of his fans.
Now, I know you.
Oh, no.
You're that secret agent. That English secret agent from England.
All right, good night. Don't panic.
Who's that?
It's headquarters.
Let me talk to him. Hello. This is Chef J.W. Pepper, Louisiana State Police. Now, you call my wife at the Near Eye Hotel and tell her I'm on a mission. I've been deputized. Right?
Right.
As a supporting evidence of this kind of thing happening in the Bond films, go check out what director John Glenn said in his commentary for Octopussy.
And I explained to him that what's very important in a Bond film is you have to involve the audience in any stunts, and therefore the only way we could make that exciting would be if we filled the hangar up with all kinds of people and aeroplanes and made it really hazardous and create some suspense.
On that point, I suspect he could also be referring to the whole other extras in the movies, be they in sports shows, operas, or people on the streets. And maybe this could extend to the extras who play henchmen, sitting in rows of seats or listening to speeches given by the key actors. Getting paid and getting to see the actors for real must have been great for the extras. This Chinese guy in A View to a Kill certainly loved to work with Roger Moore as 007.
It's a pleasure working with 007.
Thanks. Now, what about Zara?
In The Living Daylights, the storyline involves literally staged assassination attempts designed to fool other characters of a story who are the audience of this occasion, and we'll even ask the audience are temporarily fooled by this. Sure, this is present in other action movies, but hey, Bond gets a spotlight here. Crew members from the producers to stuntmen to composer John Barry made their cameos in these movies. Michael Wilson has appeared in a number of Bond films, most especially in the pyramid show scene for Spy Who Loved Me. These people may as well be watching a movie. Now, I was going to cross that detail out as incidental, but check out the ending scene of Moonraker. This scene is seen through a cinema screen, pretty much the exact dimensions of the actual movie we're watching. Note what the American military person said here.
As this is the first joint venture between our two countries, I'm having it patched directly to the White House and Buckingham Palace.
Well, I'm sure Her Majesty will be fascinated.
According to the DVD commentary from Moonraker, Apparently it was standard practice for release schedules to be made right before the production of any Bond movie has started so that members of royalty can arrange schedules to attend the premieres. Queen Elizabeth has not attended the premiere of Moonraker, Prince Andrew did. I'm sure the Queen saw Moonraker anyway, and Roger Moore, being a cheeky bugger, smiles in greeting before the people on the receiving end, including us, the audience, MI6, the American generals, and the Queen in both the movie and real-life contexts. And this breaking the fourth wall goes back to the ending of Live and Let Die. So yeah, that's my thoughts on how the James Bond films use the theatrical and circus elements in these movies. So what are the implications of all of this? First, the silly looking costumes, music and so on, seen in the context of theatrical shows, circuses and festivals, they help make the set pieces and music of other scenes more grandiose and richer by comparison. Second, the incorporation of circuses have been almost clearly used to justify the movies having the silly looking characters, and the stunt shows and scenes of Q experimenting with gadgets also give some kind of semi-plausibility to some of the action scenes. And third, this paradigm itself addresses the common criticism that the movies, particularly the ones starring Roger Moore, are silly and unrealistic, with the criticisms making them out to be flaws. The thing is, they are meant to be that way, and there are people who still enjoy Octopussy because they understood and respected the creative intentions. If you don't like them, well, it's your problem, not the filmmakers. The filmmakers clearly never intended to make realistic and plausible spy movies in the first place, so I consider those kinds of criticisms irrelevant. And the films unashamedly nudges to us on the silliness of these movies. We went through a number of examples in this video, and there are more that I haven't mentioned. But hey, being funny is not the whole show. People who say that the Roger Moore films are not serious enough, I don't think so. These movies do have the occasional serious dark moments. Let me jog your memory with a few examples. And for the people who unbelievably consider Roger Moore to be one of the worst Bond actors, just look at these scenes to see that he can deliver seriously with charisma when he wanted to.
Let me help you.
When someone's behind you on skis at 40 miles an hour trying to put a bullet in your back, you don't always have time to remember a face. In our business, and your people get killed. We both know that. So did he. It was either him or me. The answer to the question is yes. I did kill him.
And for me, the key scene that demolishes the nagging assumption that the silly Roger Moore movies cannot be serious or dramatically effective is the Bond countdown scene in Octopussy, which happens to take place in Octopussy's circus with Bond dressed as a clown. It all looks silly visually, but the foreboding music, which contrasts from a more innocent sounding circus music, the chaotic atmosphere showing that the circus act has really gone wrong, the character dynamics which can swing the wrong way, and the fact that the lives of children and baby animals are at stake, all of this works superbly to make us feel suspense in the moment. I'm not the only one saying this. I've seen a handful of online reviewers describing the scene as surprisingly suspenseful too. So it's a testament of filmmakers being able to strongly engage audiences dramatically with Bond wearing a clown costume. I used to think that The Living Daylights was a perfect example of a Bond film that balances seriousness and fun, but my recent viewings of the Roger Moore films made me think that those films were equally as capable as balancing them well. Humour and seriousness go hand in hand with these movies, from the dialogue and situations right down to action scenes. And that brings the phrase to mind, an emotional rollercoaster, of which a variety of different emotional states accentuate each other in turns during a viewer's 2-hour experience. At the same time, the Bond films having kiddie elements allow the more serious and political messages to sink in well for kids and for adults who are generally not inclined with politics, at least not inclined when those movies were made. In fact, the real world of espionage can be incredibly complex, dark and depressing, full of paranoia. This has been depicted in some very good movies like The Good Shepherd and Steven Spielberg's Munich. Those movies are educational and insightful, but we don't respond to those movies as well because of their dark presentation. So the light-hearted and humorous fantasy aspects are required of the Bond films so that audiences are more receptive to the social and political messages. And if you think about it, in some ways our lives are circuses in some shape or form from time to time. We have kids who have posters of superheroes and colourful kids' toys, and we used to be like them. We go to New Year's Eve parties and Comic Cons where we wear whatever costumes we liked, even if they're silly. We have pets who we can teach to do tricks. We go to zoos. We watch videos of people in real life doing stunts or crazy shenanigans. We can rely on the media circuses for news, but they can make issues of a day overdramatic. And ironically, real spies have called politicians clowns, and hey, so do people. Last detail before we finish. I want to quickly outline a key source which I believed caused the Bond films of the 1970s and 80s to incorporate slapstick humour more blatantly than before. As parody movies do, the strange 1967 comedy movie Casino Royale went all in to point out the silliness of the Bond films and the spy genre for comedy appeal. It's a very hit and miss movie with some great jokes and good moments, but with some terrible moments in the mix too on account of its convoluted and inconsistent production management. It was a big box office success at the time anyway, so the filmmakers have certainly seen the movie. When I rewatched that movie last year, it quickly occurred to me that some scenes and ideas of that movie really compare with some scenes in the official Bond films that came since. Go check it out and see for yourself, you will find dozens of parallels. And although comedy was present in the earlier Sean Connery films, I think the Bond filmmakers took inspiration from Casino Royale in terms of using slapstick comedy in some scenes. I do believe the Circus Paradigm of the James Bond films is something audiences feel deep down, and so even adults can still enjoy the serious Bond movies. Like I said, this interpretation is something I don't think has ever been talked about, at least online. I think this idea needs more discussion. I haven't gone through the entire production history literature. There may be more scenes and sources which supports my interpretation here, so I invite you to post your thoughts in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you happen to not appreciate the Roger Moore Bond movies before, I hope this video has inspired you to go back and watch them. And I am planning to do another video on the Bond film soon, which I will call An Artistic License to Kill.
Hope you enjoyed the show. Good night.